Sean McGowan for Acoustic Guitar Magazine, and in this weekly workout we're going to take a look at thirds. Thirds meaning the intervals based on minor thirds or major thirds, and so many different melodies and solos are based on this all-important interval. So let's dive in and take a look at week one. In week one we're going to start out just by sort of plotting out this interval on the guitar neck. With minor thirds and major thirds, you can play them on the same string, or you can play them on adjacent strings. So the first three examples 1A through C, demonstrate this. I think playing guitar is an important combination of hearing what you're playing, so it's oral that way. Seeing what you're playing is very visual, and also there's a tactile element as well. So you can definitely feel an interval in thirds. This is definitely the case. So for example 1A, we have a minor third on the same string, and then a major third is two whole steps or 4 frets above the root. So now we have, so a minor third on the same string looks like 3 frets, and then a major third is the distance of 4 frets. Now example 1B shows these two thirds intervals played on adjacent strings. So a minor third looks like this, and a major third is this. And these shapes are consistent among all strings except for the G and B strings because of the tuning of the guitar in standard. So you just have to modify the shape. So example 1C, we have a minor third, kind of looks like a major third in the other strings, and then the major third is on the same fret. Okay, here are examples 2A and 2B. Example 2A is a scale. And example 2B is that same C major scale but played in thirds. Example 3 features a C major scale played ascending, going up, and then also the same major scale in broken thirds. So here it is, example 3. Scale. And in thirds. In example 4, we're going to mix and match now. We're going to play broken thirds, basically an arpeggio, through the scale. And then down the scale, up the scale again, and then the descending thirds. So it makes a really wonderful exercise, great warm-up to practice your alternate picking and string crossing. So practice this slow with a metronome and then gradually increase your tempo. But here's example 4. Alright, in example 5 for week 1, we're going to do a permutation of these thirds through the major scale. We're going to play a 4-note pattern in thirds through the scale of C major. And it will sound like this. In week 2, we're going to take a look at playing these same types of examples through different modes and different tonal centers. So week 2, example 6 explores a C minor 7 tonality. And we're going to use the scale of Dorian, or the mode of Dorian. So example 6 features the same idea of playing the scale of Dorian in thirds. So here it is, example 6. Then example 7 now mixes up the thirds arpeggio pattern with the scale of Dorian, and then when we're descending the scale through the Dorian scale, we're going to descend in thirds patterns. So instead of just going down the scale, we're going to go down in patterns of thirds, etc., etc. So here's example 7. We'll start out with the thirds and then come down the scale. 2 and 3 and 4 and. Alright, so now in examples 8 and 9, we're going to take the same concept and apply it to a dominant 7 sound using a Mixolydian mode. So C9, C7, C13, all of those chords, this will work with that. So here's example 8, taking Mixolydian and playing it in thirds. 3 and 4 and. And then example 9 is similar to example 7, where we'll go up in thirds and then come down the mode of Mixolydian in broken thirds. So here's example 9, 3 and 4 and. This makes great material for solo lines as well. Okay, so with examples 10 and 11, both of these examples illustrate this concept of moving through thirds with in the capacity of a line. If you're playing a solo break or a melody. So example 10 moves through two different chords, C minor 7 through an F7, and essentially using C Dorian as your raw material. So here's the line, 1, 2, 3, and. Example 11 also uses two chords. The first chord is a G7, moving to a C7, kind of like a blues. And what we're doing is basically outlining those two dominant chords using a pattern based on thirds. So here's example 11. 1, 2, 3, 4. In week 3, we're going to take a look at thirds played together. This concept is usually known as playing double stops for guitarists and violinists and other string players. So what we're going to do is basically take a single note line or melody and harmonize it with the third above. So example 12 illustrates the first 3 notes of a C major scale played together in double stops and thirds. So the example is. This is a really cool concept because you can almost approximate the sound of like a twin guitar lead. You know, if you're playing a country tune or a bluegrass tune or rock or anything, it doesn't matter. You can kind of create an effect of 2 guitar players playing or 2 horns playing. So in example 13, we've added some chromaticism and pay close attention to the fingerings because it's important to keep it easy. But if you're playing over C major 7 type of sound, the example in 13 is 3, 4. Alright, so in examples 14 and 15, we're going to take the same concept of playing double stops in thirds over C minor 7 and C dominant 7 chords. So here's example 14, and again, all we're doing is playing little scale fragments of Dorian and harmonizing that with the third above. So example 14 is 3 and 4 and. And you can slide in between any of those notes and get a nice effect. Example 15 uses a little bit of chromaticism to give it a little bit of a blues vibe or a country vibe over the C7. So we're going to start out kind of like with the major example and then add some chromaticism and then accenting on the 7th of that. So example 15 is 3 and 4 and. Alright, right, that brings us to example 16. This is a cool little lick over a G7 chord. And this one is highly chromatic. So basically you're taking a shape and moving it around and connecting important chord tones of the scale in thirds. So here it is in time. 3 and 4 and. So we're basically outlining G mixolydian and then connecting some of those notes of mixolydian with some chromaticism, such in the first part, and then a chromatic approach. Chromatic approach again, and then a descending chromatic approach. So we'll end the way that we started. Sorry. Alright, so in week 4, now we've graduated to using all of these approaches in a soloing context. So example 17 features a common chord progression in the key of C, C, D minor, G, C, like a 1, 2, 5, 1 progression. And we start out playing some double stops and then a single note line in thirds, and then we finish off with some more double stops over C. So it creates kind of a nice little flavor and also some different textures to your solo with a contrast created between double stops and single note lines. So here we go. Here's example 17. 1, 2, 3, and. Alright, our final example, example 18, illustrates maybe a jazz influence line, something like a horn player would play. This is very common for a trumpeter or a saxophonist to play a line built in thirds. This is over a C minor 7 chord, and I strongly recommend just playing all of these examples over a looper or band in the box or something with some chord changes so you can hear the line in relation to the chord. But here's a C minor, and here's the line, example 18. 1, 2, 3, 4.